Welcome everybody to the Autry. My name is Ben Fitzsimmons and I'm the Associate Director of Programs here, and I am thrilled to welcome you all. As we do at all Autry programs, I would like to begin with a statement written in collaboration with the local Tongva community. The Autry Museum of the American West acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. We recognize that the Autry Museum and its campuses are located on the traditional lands of the Gabrielino Tongva, and we pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives past, present, and emerging. So we are so pleased tonight to host this exciting collaboration with the Costume Designers Guild and welcome so many of you here. Hands up if this is your first time to the Autry. Well, I'm glad you made it in. Do come back. I hope that many of you had a chance to visit our galleries earlier and explore especially two of our most recent exhibitions. Imagined Wests, which explores the ways we tell the many stories of the American West through popular culture, clothing, toys, art, archives, and Reclaiming El Camino, Native Resistance in the Missions and Beyond, a brand new exhibition that highlights the rich history of Indigenous activism in the California borderlands and repositions El Camino Real as the ancient trade route for Native people long before the Franciscan missions. If you didn't get a chance to see them, come back. We're always here. We're not going anywhere. Those are two very different exhibitions, both of which provide new perspectives on the region as part of our mission to share the stories of all the peoples of the American West. Speaking of discovering stories, the Autry's collection of artifacts, archives, and other items is available for researchers, both online and in person. We have clothing catalogs, costume sketches, period photographs, and much, much more. So if you are inspired after tonight's conversation or find yourself working on a Western, you know where to come for more information. Head to the Autry and submit a research request on our website. But enough from me. Other than to say, please welcome the Director of Education of the Costume Designers Guild, Ivy Thede.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening and welcome to the Costume Designers Guild Masterclass on How the West Was Worn. My name is Ivy Thede and I am the Vice President and Director of Education at the CDG. I first want to thank my teammate, the amazing Communications Director, Anna Wyckoff, for her support. Our Executive Director, Brigida Romanoff, and President Terry Gordon, for all their support and all of my crazy options for classes, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the Autry. What an incredible venue. Their generous partnership tonight. I hope that we have many, many more classes here. I'd also like to thank our wonderful sponsors, RRL Melrose and Western Costumes. Now, please help me welcome moderator for this evening, my dear friend, Catherine Adair.
Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome, everybody. Before I bring our panel out, I would love one of my favorite people from Western Costume, Gilbert, if you'd be kind enough to stand up. I'm sure that's going to be payback next time And also the wonderful support that we always get from RRL Melrose, if you'd be kind enough to stand up too. So welcome. We have an amazing panel here this evening. I should say, sadly, one of our members of our panel she's fine. But she was not able to join us this evening. Something personal came up, but we've checked in on her and we wish her well. But that said, let's get on with the panel. I would love to introduce Mary Sofries. Mary. just a few films under her belt. EC, if you'd be sweet enough to come out. I think next we have Paisha. And Antoinette. Of course, I did them miraculously out of order, but we did a pretty good job of, being tonality as a group. So the first thing, when Ivy was kind enough to ask me to do this, after I'd sort of taken a deep breath, was I thought, well, gosh, Westerns, yes, everybody knows a Western. And then I thought maybe I should look it up, or maybe my dear husband pointed out I should look it up, even though I have been privileged enough to design one. So the American Film Institute, if you'd bear with me, and I'm sort of a bit of a nerd for a minute, the American Film Institute defines a Western film as following, quote, set in the American West that embody the spirit, the struggle, and the demise of the new frontier. Originally, these films were called Wild West dramas and referenced to Wild West shows like Buffalo Bill Cody's. Now, a number of you probably knew that. I grew up in England, so, which most of you know. But then I started to talk to Ivy and a number of other people, and then I realized that it was actually a much bigger and deeper field than that. So then I went to our favorite place, the computer, and went online. And after reading a number of different blogs and bits and pieces, the Collider, Riley Presnell from the Collider, gave me a long list of subcultures. So the first Western, which was called The Great Train Robbery, was in 1903. But then came the classic golden age of Westerns. We think of John Wayne and Gary Cooper. After that, the spaghetti Western, the acid Westerns, the revisionist Westerns, the apocalyptic Westerns, end of the world Westerns and wild stories, comedies and spoofs Westerns, epic Westerns, outlaw Westerns. There's a couple of us who all agreed that we had seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid more than once before we came out this evening. Sci-fi, spy Westerns, and which then is a subgenre of steampunk Westerns, horror Westerns, noir Westerns, neo-contemporary Westerns, and martial arts Westerns. Who knew? But the gift I think we have this evening, as having bored all of you with that, is that we have actually representatives that have done all of these, or certainly a number of these different ones. And we also discovered that 4 of the 5 of us on the stage had all worked during COVID before there was inoculations. So who do we start with? I think I'd love to start actually by saying, Mary, you and I were talking just before we came out, and by the time you had the privilege of designing quite beautifully True Grit, you had known the Coen brothers and worked with them for 14 years, which is amazing. So I'd love you to, if you wouldn't mind, speak a little bit to what it's like at that point to go into research and communicating with your directors. I heard about True Grit at the premiere for A Serious Man. It was like at the New York Film Festival, and Joel said to me, we're going to do True Grit. And he had they had the script already written, they adapted the book, and had about, I wasn't on payroll, but I did have about 6 months to stew and think about it and do the research. And it was very scary to me. I had never done that time period before. And
was aware of it through just like paintings and watching films and history and such, but really knowing the nuts and bolts of it was it allowed me a lot of time to sink my teeth in it, and it was great, and it made me feel really comfortable to sort of just start designing it eventually. But like I don't know if anybody was here for the reception, but there were some boards out there from True Grit, and it's true to my heart, and I still keep those boards in my garage, and they're not, temperature controlled or anything. But anyway, it's the amount of research that I had done. It was at Western Costume in the research library. I was there every day for like at least 2 months, and it was just I don't know. It just informed me so thoroughly by doing the research that I was like, like I could roll up my sleeves and I was ready to do it. But the fact that I had that lead time made me so I wasn't so nervous about designing this time period for the first time. Like I felt like not an expert, but I felt like I knew what I was doing. And their script was very much adherent to the book. In fact, they said don't watch. I know this is blasphemy, but they told me not to watch the John Wayne movie, which I had seen, but I didn't rewatch it. And for that film, I didn't watch any Westerns. Like, because they wanted it to feel real and true to the time period. And I didn't want to have and this is no offense, I'd have Westerns that I love, but I wanted the approach to be completely like a blank slate for me. Like it wasn't. So I was influenced by the research and the writing and the book, which I highly recommend. It's not a very long book, but it's as good, if not better, than the movie. And it's a great read, but it's informative of the characters. And so all of that. And so I just did a ton of research, and I still have the boards to show it. Like I have tons at home that I didn't bring too. It's crazy.
Well, and you were also telling me that you actually came here to the Autry.
Yes.
And you saw some of the fabric.
Yes. No.
Real fabric.
I saw real fabric, but the coolest thing is in the script, I didn't make up, there's a guy who wears woolly chaps. And after researching, I understood what they were, but I had read that the Autry had a pair here because I just wanted to feel what they felt like and to make sure I was doing it right. And I went, this was a while ago, it was probably 2009, 2010. So there was a very nice person who, I told them what I was doing and they let me come, and they opened a drawer and they had a real pair of woolly chaps, and with white gloves on, she even let me, I did take my hand out of the glove and touch it, but just really quickly. But I could feel how heavy they were, and it kind of confirmed everything that I had read. Like all of you guys have done the research. Like you read, and like reading about it is more informative than even the photographs, and like the weight of everything. And like, if you've ever worn like a heavy coat all day, you're like, oh, I can't wait to take this off. All of their stuff was like that heavy. And anyway, thank you to the Autry Museum for letting me do that. And it was really informative.
So the antithesis of your experience after all those years of working with this extraordinary team, Antoinette, you just finished an amazing piece, The Harder They Fall, with a first-time director and the first time that you had designed for him as well. So I'd love to hear about your meeting with him for the first time and how that came about.
James Samuel, this is interesting, and my agent is in the room, and I don't even know how I got that meeting. You'll have to tell me one day, James. Because I knew everybody wanted to get on that project. And he was in London, so I didn't even get to meet him in person the first time. He FaceTimed me just out of the blue. I knew I was going to have a meeting sometime. And this was also a prequel to what was to come, because this is James. All of a sudden it's 1 a.m. and you're getting a FaceTime. But he FaceTimed me, and I was playing, I'm Jamaican, and I was playing reggae music in the background, which is the norm for me. But in his script, he opened most of the scenes with a reggae song that he either had part of the lyrics or just the name. And I knew all the songs because it was the songs that my parents I grew up to listening. So it felt very comfortable. So he calls and he's like, but wait, what that you have on? And I said, I'm playing music. I'm Jamaican. He says, you're Jamaican? So then it went into a whole half hour of his life in London, in Brixton, running around with Jamaicans and how he loved Patty. So we bonded. Before we even started talking about the script, we bonded out of his love of Jamaican culture. And that's why if you've watched the film or heard the soundtrack, there's so much Jamaican and reggae influences throughout the script and the soundtrack. So we met via FaceTime, and then when we met in person when he came to LA, actually we met with Whitney, my assistant, and then Whitney dropped us off on Melrose, and we just walked and talked and went shopping for him, you know. So we got to know each other, but that's James. In shopping, I got to see his likes. I got to see what he gravitated to. I got to talk to him about music, which was our core connection because he did everything from a place of music, and he makes music to then write the script. So by the time we went to set, the music that the actors were working to was already playing. So we had music on set all the time. But he didn't, because it was his first time as a director, he's directed his own music videos and he'd done some shorts, but he grew up in entertainment. He was an artist, an overall artist. So he spoke that language. And I had to, all of us have worked with different kinds of directors. You adapt to each one. And I just adapted to this very creative, very eccentric director who would break out in singing a song in the middle of a meeting.
That's pretty amazing. I think there's some times when any one of us would have been grateful for that.
Yes. Unless you have a team in the shop waiting for a decision.
Isi, I think of the group on stage, you had the widest time span in doing Bass Reeves. And when I was reading and doing some research and for this evening, reading that you did that battle scene, the first for anybody who has seen Bass Reeves, there's this enormous scene at the very, very beginning, and it's a recreation of one of the more tragic, well, the whole Civil War was tragic. I'm horrible. I can say that, can't I? But this battle scene at the very beginning of the first episode is enormous.
Yeah, it was enormous.
It's enormous. It's a movie.
We had 129 stuntmen alone, 80 horses, 4 cannons, and 320 soldiers. So, and that was for 4.5 minutes at the beginning of the show. So Gilbert, I think, remembers. I just want to go back to something Mary said really quickly because, we all inspire each other. I had never done a Western. And every time we do something new, it doesn't even matter if it's contemporary, you have to research. We need to learn. And I felt exactly the way she did. I wasn't paying attention to Westerns at all. And I actually bumped into her at American one afternoon. She goes, "What you doing?" I said, "I'm doing Westerns." She goes, "Oh, they're hard." She goes, "They're really, it's good to do and you feel great, but oh, they're hard." And, and she's right. They are hard. They're messy. They're dirty. But the fun of learning that part of history, we went from 1863 to 1878. And I had just I didn't really even pay attention in that time period in school or anything about the Civil War or what was going on. It just was not something I was interested in. But I got the series. I remember an old dear friend of ours, Richard Hornan. I know. So Richard had the books. Richard had the Civil War books from Time Life, which are the most brilliant set of books. And he had the whole series, and he had left it with Kimberly. And so I called Kimberly and I said, I need the books. Can I borrow them? And talk about reading stories, looking at the pictures. I mean, it was way better than any internet will ever be. It's just, you got in, you started living it, and you started, like one book would be about the pioneer woman, another would be about the bandits. My thing was lawmen and bandits more than ranchers and farmers. So, there'd be a whole book on just the lawmen, and it was just incredible. So the research to get, you can't even start until you get your feet in there and really, really start to understand the difference between this guy and that guy, because at the beginning it all looks very similar. But we did have the Civil War, which I knew was going to suck the life out of us because it's big. So
Well, and usually, for anybody, usually in, I think, most of our collective experience, you will start with a smaller scene. so that the camera, they can make sure that they like the lighting and they're using the right lenses, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, not so much.
Sometimes lately, and we've been talking about this, they want to start with the big scene because they want to get those dailies and they want to show everybody what they're going to do, and they want to start with a bang.
They want to feel that they're spending their money wisely.
That it's all going to be worth it. But it was supposed to be 4.5 days of shooting, and on day 2, an ice storm hit. So then we were down for 4 days, all locked in our houses in Fort Worth, Texas, with an ice storm and black ice everywhere, which gives you an idea of how cold it was.
Yeah.
So I didn't know Texas was that cold. I'm ignorant. I really didn't think Texas ever got that cold. But it was brutal because, those soldiers were out there. They were on horses. And that was a movie unto itself.
Yeah.
Just that sequence, because really it had very little to do with the rest of the whole show. We'd never, in 1 or 2 other scenes, we had soldiers, but just a few, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. But there was never, it wasn't emancipation. It wasn't a whole movie about the Civil War.
So then to bring Paisha into the mix, I should explain Paisha. I'm going to ask her to tell you how she got into costume design, because it's an amazingly brave story. But separate from that, you should also know that she is now a director and is also a scriptwriter in her own right. So she is, which is very exciting. So we're all looking for work, just so that you know.
I can't wait to work with everybody.
But once you've told everybody a little bit about how you ended up on Justified and how she also, I should explain, the first show she ever designed was Cold Case. And she got nominated for a Costume Designers Guild award all 3 years that she designed it, straight out of the gate. Thank you. Which is huge. And then I was like, oh, okay, everybody else is doing period. Oh, she's doing modern. And then I started to really think about the intricacies of doing a modern Western set today, supposedly not looking anything like Los Angeles. And then I started reading about where you made it in a charming little place called Green Valley.
Yes.
So tell me about Green Valley.
Well, we shot in Santa Clarita at the stages there, and then we had locations all over. Usually they were sort of Altadena, Pasadena. They were kind of nicer, and then we branched out to Green Valley, which was up in the hills, and I want to say it was about a half an hour outside of Santa Clarita. There was no cell service. It had been a hotbed of the Hells Angels back in the day. We had base camp parked across from lovely neighbors who didn't really want us there. And then we branched out to Fraser Park, much farther away. they were all difficult locations in that they weren't built for us to film there. You were out in the cold, you were out in the elements, you had to keep the actors warm. Luckily, everybody was kind of dirty, so we didn't really have to keep them clean. But it was challenging. It was challenging to get, I remember it was challenging for them to get background to want to work up there because you couldn't use your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And how did you manage to not make it look Los Angeles centric? Because I think there's quite a talent to that, because you're supposed to be in Kentucky, yes?
I did some research. I took the show over from Anne Crabtree, who did it first season, who designed first. She did a lovely job, and she created a great foundation. And then I picked up for Moonshine Wars, which was the second season, and did all the seasons. Second season, Moonshine War, was my favorite season, not because I did it, but I think the show really found its legs there and really came into its own. So Elmore Leonard had written the books, and I had been a big fan of Elmore Leonard even before I started Justified, and so I was sort of familiar with the characters and familiar with the story. And I did some research, and I sort of looked at what Anne did, and I kind of thought, okay, well, Margot Martindale is playing the matriarch, but she was written as the patriarch. So I thought perhaps she would have taken her dead husband's clothes and put those on once she got bigger and older, and she ascended more as the patriarch instead of the matriarch. And I remember our first fitting, and a whole rack of men's clothes there, and she walked in and she sort of said, "These are weird." And I said, "Yeah, they are, because they're men's clothes." But she ended up really embracing it, and I think it really suited her character. And they ended up being found items. You know, I would rent some things, I would find some things at the Goodwill. Wherever they came from, they just sort of came from if they suited the character. So I got to cheat. I didn't really have to hold any time period.
Well, okay, to that's a very good segue you just did, because again, in referencing all the different types of storytelling that have taken over some aspect of the Western idiom, Antoinette, you did this lovely, I think, extraordinary job. And I think the best quote is a mixture of historical and modernity. In reading that you took in historical research from the Victorian and Edwardian era, but you also took in high fashion and interesting pieces from the 20th century and beyond.
And beyond. It was really important for me that this was a Western talking about people that were real. They existed. We were not copying, we were not modeling them exactly. We used their names, we used some of their story, but I was allowed some license. But I also knew that for me, I needed a base, and the base was the Victorian silhouette. And what's great about fashion is that depending on where you pull it from, the time period, whether it's 60s, 70s, current day, you can find some of those silhouettes to work within what you're doing. And it wasn't that my director came out and says, you have to use fashion. But just in the interview process and meeting with him, and how quickly he glazed over when I showed him the accurate pieces, but showing him a Prada or Balmain jacket, and he lit up like I knew what excited him. So the challenge my team and I had was walking that line that I felt true to the period, but gave it a twist. And also knowing from very early that our studio, Netflix, they were doing a store. They wanted items that the characters were wearing that the audience could relate to. They wanted their their demographic to be able to say, where can I get that Ralph Lauren lace blouse that Regina King is wearing? Or those boots are from Golden Goose, I can buy those now. And incorporating that into, I mean, most of the principal cast clothes were built, but streamlining it so that if somebody wanted to copy it, it wasn't such a stretch. And then James says, I'm not doing a dusty, dirty cowboy movie.
I know that's one of my favorite quotes of his.
You know, so.
Whereas you, it was almost the antithesis of that, because they wanted everything. You wanted to believe that that's where you were. So The Weight of Your Wolves, I remember reading, or actually listening to an interview you had done, where you talked about the coat, Maddie's coat in the river. And you saying, well, we'll just see what happens, which I thought was very brave.
Did I say that? I don't remember.
That's
We
what
had
happens when you-
multiples. We had multiples. That's what. That's, you know, if it didn't behave well, we had another one, and I think we waterproof. I forget because we had to do things for safety, and I don't remember that quote. But yeah, it wasn't like we had time, and it was, you know, the Coens always have to work on a limited budget because their movies don't make a lot of money, so it wasn't like we had a lot of R&D or that we were going to go a day early and have this happen. We probably wet it at the costume shop, but I don't, you know, I'm sure it wasn't like something that was.
I
had a
guess
lot
my
of
point
preparation
was
time.
in watching it and rewatching it, which was such a gift, you can feel the weight, you can feel the texture, you can, it's very clear that you've used things that had the right weight and the right depth and there's a gravitas to all of it, and the practicality of that time period,
Yeah.
which is such a huge piece, because you didn't go off to Target and say, I need a new t-shirt.
No, and you own something for years and years and years
Exactly,
and your
yeah.
whole life sometimes. And her coat was to have come from her dad. So it was big on her, and it was probably from 20 years ago, if not longer. So yeah, I remember there were a lot of nights in a bungalow at Western Costumes, sitting on the floor with just piles of fabric, but it was from overseas. I remember it was very hard to find the weight wool that I wanted in the United States. And that didn't have a poly blend like M. Gravy, right? So it was like, I remember there were a lot of wools from overseas, and then you had to wait for it to get there. And then you had to pattern it. And we learned, it was a lot of learning, and treating the fabric before you make it was a big learning thing for me, and something that I've taken with me for the whole time. And it was just, and I don't even think, like Joel and Ethan, I remember having a conversation with them, and they just wanted it to be, they wanted, you know, they don't change. And a lot of times in Westerns, you don't have a ton of costume changes. I mean, it's not the rule, but in ours, it was like, okay, there's a silhouette, and that you want to be able to recognize it if it's dark and it's a shadow. And I remember having a conversation with them, like, it's iconic is what Joel said. It wasn't, it didn't have, that was the edict that they gave me, was that they wanted the characters to be iconic and each representative of their character. So it was a very character driven script and motif and kind of ethos about the whole thing. And so then it was my own, like, obsession, all this other stuff. Like, I don't think Joel and Ethan, they wanted it to look like that. They didn't need to know, nor did they ever know the journey that I went to get there. But, you know, it's my own insanity.
I don't think they ever know the journeys we go through.
No, they might have known.
Do they? I don't think so.
They might have known, like, the bear was the one thing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about
Yeah,
the bear in a
they
minute.
might have known, but not until the morning of the shoot. I don't think they
But
knew what
then
happened.
you had a different challenge, I think, in that, and I know you had some fabrics woven.
Yeah. Did you use Rabbit Goody on that also? We had some fabric woven Rabbit Goody who makes fabrics up in upstate New York.
Yeah.
I've worked with her off and on for years and years and years, and she's still at it, which is so nice. But we had the same thing. I mean, my ACDs are here tonight, Amelia and Jackie, fabrics extraordinaire. And we did dig up a lot of fabrics from Europe. Sometimes we would felt it a little bit to get that weight, because it's always about the weight. And but you know, it's in any period piece, the challenge is fabric, because fabric has changed so much,
And the
it acts
dye, and the
differently.
color, and the
colors,
colors.
and it just makes up differently. It has a different hand.
Okay, but then for you, your protagonist, he goes from being a slave all the way through to a successful gentleman.
Right.
And you're not shooting that in sequence. And
Well, because it was
and-
episodic, we shot in blocks. So we kind of did start out with him at the beginning in the Civil War in '63, and it was a little bit felt like it was in sequence, and it's about how much money he made. These lawmen were making like $20,000 a year in 1870s. I mean, it was crazy. So the family did get wealthier and had a bigger social standing. So that was kind of nice, but still not a lot of clothes. Still, I mean, people just didn't have lots of clothes.
did you keep some of the underwear and some of the petticoats and some of the underlayers and then not rebuild, but as their status grew?
You know,
How did you do that?
because of the story of Bass Reeves and Jenny Reeves, his wife, and because we went over a period of those 12 years, I upped her look, not so much using the same thing, but definitely upped her look because she could afford to buy new things, and it was really important for her to take her standing in society. That was an important part. For Bass, it was basically very similar pieces over and over again. But I think it's interesting because every job, the script asks for a different tone. I mean, I was talking with Antoinette earlier about Harder They Fall, which was so interesting and fun and hot. And you talk about the music, which I had not heard about. To me, that is telling you already that this is not going to be your average Western. So it asks for something else. And you know, and True Grit is just like this deep Western story that, you know, asks for that kind of gravitas. And silhouette is so important, especially those guys on horses with their hats. You always have to know who they are. And the sun's going down and they're going down the mountain. So
I have to jump in here because I got called out on social media today. Someone DM'd me and said that I reposted a lot of the Harder They Fall because it was like going down memory lane. It was only a couple of years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago now with COVID. Post-COVID. And I you know, just posted a few things just to say, oh my God, I love these. I remember now you're far away enough.
They're like old friends now.
Old friends now. I was traumatized when we were doing it. But
It's
and
so
my
true.
team, some of my team are here and they were PTSD. But they said this is not a Western. It's not dirty. It's not aged. And I got a lot of that when I was, you know, when it came out. But they didn't know my director. And his biggest mandate, this is a Black man whose DNA is African. He's Nigerian who grew up in London, running around with crazy Jamaicans. So as far as he was concerned, he already has the stigma, or as he explains it, they already always think you're dirty, you're disheveled, you're poor. And I'm not making that story. These Black people owned this town. It was their town. Mary in the movie owned several saloons.
Yeah.
You know?
And the sets, I mean, it wasn't based in, you go to the White City. I mean, that was
I
hilarious.
was just about to say.
I mean, any movie that's got that scene in it is not, you don't have to play it straight.
No.
Yeah. So
And you shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. So clothes were to appear that they own them. He didn't mind if they were dirty, if it related to the action and the story, but not just dusty for the sake of being dusty, which was his mandate. And even when somebody says, aren't you going to dust them up? He says, no! It was absolutely, so they looked cleaner, but then if you're in a town and you're not doing anything other than hanging out, why would you be dusty? Right?
It was appropriate, totally appropriate for the story. Like it helped tell the story, which is the whole point of what we all do up here, right?
Exactly.
We're telling the story.
He's
and
telling his story.
His story.
And that's valid.
Yes. And I'm hired to help him.
That we're here to bring their vision to fruition.
Exactly.
That's it.
I think when I was, certainly I can speak, when I was training, it was very easy to watch film and television and go, oh, why did they make that choice? Because there was a fundamental difference in my experience between that and designing theater. Theater was a much tidier sandbox, if you like. At least it was for me. And then I was privileged enough to come into this world and join this extraordinary community. And then I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Because exactly to your point, we are facilitating the visual journey and the visual dream of what's on the page and what the director and the showrunners are asking of us. And just because you've seen a Western which was gritty and dirty, and that was that vision, that was that story. I said to Antoinette the other day, I said I loved that it was a Western that was a fairy tale. And you called me and you went, what on earth were you talking about, Kate? And I said, well, fairy tales aren't always a happy or a pretty environment. But it was his fairy tale. And that I thought was lovely. Speaking of social media, so did you have challenges
With social media?
with social media? Because going back and again looking, people became obsessed with which boot he was in and which coat and where could they find the coat. And there are whole blogs on the 5 years that you did.
I still get emails. I do. Social media wasn't such a big deal for us. I am still not really big on social media, so people have to sort of track me down to find out about that coat. But I did get a lot of questions about the boots, about the ring, about the hat, and about his coat, and also about his denim coat, because there was a big controversy of whether it came from Levi's or not. Levi said it didn't, and it said Levi's on it. So I think it was a vintage one, though. So no, social media wasn't as big of a deal as it is now, but I did transition into directing using social media.
Amazing. I think there's, because all of you are accomplished, all of you have done extraordinary work. I think it's it's quite easy for somebody to look at your collective work on the stage and go that there must come a point where you can sit in an office with a scented candle and some nice music playing, and you have the team around you that can facilitate making sure that vision happens. I know that's not true. But there is a logic to somebody saying, well, Mary, at this point, you don't need to be up at 4 a.m, right? And then, which leads me to wanting you to tell your bear story, if you don't mind.
Oh, right. Every project has a doozy, right? I mean, at least for me. Or two, right. Yeah, the gentleman, there's a scene in the, and it's in the book, where a gentleman rides up on a horse, and he's a very big man, and he is wearing a bear, is how it's described in the book, and that's how they described it in the script. And the man that they cast was like 6'7", and in the high 200s, if not more, and he was a big dude. And he came, and we measured him, and we gave him like sort of a silhouette of clothes that he would wear underneath. But I had shown them a photo of, it was actually from a Native American research and it was a wolf, which somebody here did a wolf. Was it you? You did it. Yeah. So you knew that photograph, right?
I did.
And so I said, is that what you mean? But the wolf head is on top of the human head. And they were like, yeah. And that's very Joel and Ethan. Yeah. And then they move on. But again, like what you were saying, like the shopping trip is fascinating. I love that. But you kind of get to know, I'm getting all over the place, but you get to know your directors. Like sometimes that's the most stressful part of a new job is like, what do they like? But so I knew their inclinations and their taste, which was a huge advantage. I'm not going to lie. It's been very helpful. But anyway, so they said, yeah, that's what it is. And so this man was very big and I had ordered like a bear, dead bear from a thing from a place in Montana that specialized in this. And we're like, we have this gigantic man. It needs to be like I need the biggest bear. And they were like, okay, we ordered it. We put a deposit and it was curing. And so we were like, okay, it shoots on this and this day. We need it in Santa Fe by this date. And it's curing. We're waiting. And then there was a massive snowstorm or something happened weather-wise. And I get the call from the producer saying, we have to film the bear man tomorrow. He's flying out. And meanwhile, the bear skin that would have fit him was in Montana still like on a rack. And that was so... Jenny Egan was the assistant costume designer on that film. And she and we got in the car and went to Albuquerque because we were shooting in Santa Fe, prepping in a morgue, I might add. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So it's not glamorous and there were no scented candles. And so we're driving to Santa Fe and speeding. And I called what's the name? The people who stuff dead animals? Taxidermist. I called the taxidermist I called a taxidermist in Santa Fe and said, do you have any bear rugs? And he was like, yeah, I got about 4 or 5. So we go to this place and literally like it was working the next morning. And, we bought all of them. And so we're driving in the car and there's like all these dead bears in the back seat and flooring it back to Santa Fe. And like thankfully there was a big head. And so that's the one we picked for the head. And then we had to cobble the rest together. It was so great. And I hate fur. Like I have a funny story about Richard Horner. Like when I was his assistant costume designer, he used to hide from the stoles. He would if the talons would fall off, he'd hide them in the safety pin box. So I would find them when I would get to hand him a safety pin and I'd be like, ah! So I don't like fur. I don't like it. It just freaks me out. And we were piecing it together and there was me and Celeste and I don't know. I think that when we were on location,
Jenny was there, right?
Yeah, we were all there. But I mean, there's 2 people here that worked on True Grit. If you want to raise your hand, they were in the tailor shop. There they are back there. Hi, lady. But you guys were you in Santa Fe when this happened? No. Okay. So anyway, we had to sew. We sewed the bear together, and it didn't finish, and we didn't finish until like 4 a.m. Then we had to age it and wax it because it was new. They want, a bear rug is like for people to lie on and do things on it, and so we had to make it look like this guy lived in this bear coat. He was meant to be kind of weird and disoriented, and it was meant to be almost otherworldly, but that he slept in this coat and had so for years and years and years. And so we had to age it after we cobbled it together. But it ended up working. But yeah, that was like a doozy.
Can we show? There's one.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of stories like that.
Yes. Life is never boring. Antoinette, you had the most amazing cast. You really did. I mean, extraordinary. And you were filming this during the pandemic. We all have horrible pandemic stories. You had designed clothes around corsets. You need 2 people to put a corset on. Mm-hmm. And your leading actress didn't really want to do a Western until she got talked into it by your very brilliant director.
Yeah.
I think her direct quote was, "I hate Westerns."
Exactly.
What a nice place to start.
Well, you'd never have known it because she looked remarkable. She was extraordinary on camera.
And I love her to death, but it was not easy. How do I get Regina to put a hat on? Well, maybe if we wrapped a beautiful silk scarf underneath that just flutters. She says, will it flutter? I said, yes, it will flutter. So I told James, you have to give me something that freaking scarf. And it did. He got it in there. She does like this and this thing flutters. But what was challenging is that's where the fashion helped. To show her ways in which her character could be iconic, could be different, you know? I mean, even the last shot with the coat, that is very much a men's cutaway frock coat that we did in denim and leather, and her pants were denim but stretch, you know? So there's ways in which I was able to guide her into being in a Western by, you know, Golden Goose boots, and then Golden Goose is like a little call, and they shipped her own Golden Goose boots. So it was massaging her, carefully curating the look, and having her be a part of it. That helped. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I had a blackout moment and it went down memory. But the COVID part, which was hard with the corsets, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but Conan is in the audience, my supervisor, and he went ahead when we got the call that we're coming back after the whole world shut down. And he very carefully, with safety and production, separated out each area that we were all different groups to work in. And the principal cast had their truck, the background had their truck, the stunts had their truck. And between myself and my supervisor, my assistant, Whitney, we covered the three. And one of our first truck people, what we realized, the keys very quickly, is not everyone knew how to navigate this new world.
I don't think any of us did.
No, and it was incredibly tense. The actors were scared. Some of the crew were scared. And our truck person, even though she took the job, and this is what her job is to help the actors get into their clothes, she was afraid to be anywhere near the actors. She was afraid to touch the actors, even with mask and being tested every day. She refused to leave the truck. So we had to put, you know, the clothes on the outside. Then she'd come to the outside, get them, put them in steam bags, dry cleaning bags, steam them before we bring them into the truck. But this is a period film. And I had an actress who had a dress that had buttons from her neck to her knees and corset underneath. And she couldn't, I mean, Regina was great. She was trying to be understanding, but it got to a point where I need help. And one of the things that she did was ask to have her team, her stylists in LA, ship in a corset that she was used to wearing that zipped up the front. And that was great. It's like, oh, we solved one of the problems.
The shape's different.
That part. And the thing is, it's happening as we're shooting. So it's not like the dress was not built with a, Victoria's Secret zip-up corset. It was built with a period corset that laced up the back and the front and all that stuff that we do to get them into it. So when I got to set and I saw her on set and we're about to shoot and I look at the dress and I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't fit. But there's nothing you can do. I couldn't even get close to her.
They had the ruler, right?
The ruler, so we couldn't get it, it was, I don't know how James, first-time director, trying to guide his actors, talk to his actors, he'd have somebody come up and go, "Step away. You're too close."
Yeah, how quickly we forget.
Yeah.
I forgot about those
the
steam
COVID
bags.
the COVID
like, what was that
monitors.
about? Where you put the clothes in a steam in like the zip
Right.
thing, and then like spray that was like supposed to kill the COVID in there.
It
Like,
didn't-
we were doing all
it's
kinds of crazy
ridiculous.
stuff. I forgot about that bag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's
I
just-
lived in
it's
a
just like a-
terrarium.
Mary, it's just like a good movie. You forget all the bad.
Yeah, you only remember that. Like, yeah, it was like nice, and no, it wasn't. It was.
Tell me about working on the ranch outside of Fort Worth.
The ranch was beautiful. I mean, we were in Fort Worth, and we shot within an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of our base where we had our costume shop. We shot on Silverado Ranch and several others, and I have to say Texas isn't my cup of tea, but the sunrises and the sunsets are beautiful. And the one really amazing thing I think we probably all experienced about working on Westerns is it's really nice to be out in the fresh air with the horses and the wranglers and it's just there's something it's so organic. For us, it was really nice. And that part is super enjoyable, even though, you have to have multiples of everything and everybody's stunted. And if it gets on a horse, any actor that got on a horse had to be stunted. Mm-hmm. So everything has to be multiple. Our stuntmen cast more people than our casting directors did. That's how many stunt people we had. But we had a fantastic stunt coordinator. We were very, very blessed, and a great wrangler leader. So everybody makes your job a little better if they're better at it.
Absolutely true.
And you have to dress all the wranglers, and they don't want to be dressed.
They
they
don't.
don't.
They're not
They
as
are
fit
not
as the
happy.
stunt guys.
What?
They're not as fit as the stunt guys.
No. But they know how to handle oxen.
And then, so did you stay in Fort Worth?
We were in Fort Worth the whole time. There was only one distant location where we spent 2 nights out at the a plantation location.
And then you had a workroom?
We set it up from scratch again. I'd like, to get a little gold button every time I set up a workshop. I'm so good at it now. I do it everywhere. No, we got a blank space, and, we set up a dirty room for all the aging and dying, and we racked out rooms, and it was an old warehouse where the mill was, which is always just so much fun to be near the mill because it's so quiet and nice.
It's lovely.
Yeah, and there's no dust or anything now. And then they had a little bit of a stage. It was an empty warehouse that I don't even know what they did there prior to, but it had been empty for like 10 years.
Was it next to a railroad track?
It was near a railroad track, yeah.
It used to be a cotton mill.
Oh, was that it? On Camp,
We'll have to chat.
Camp Bowie.
Yeah, we'll have to chat about that
Oh,
later.
okay. Well, it's all set up now, and they've got another show in there, and now they're renting it out, and it's all beautiful for them.
Thanks to you.
They've got all the racks and the workshop and the fitting room and the offices.
The most important thing, like in setting up a shop for a Western, I found is how to store the hats.
Yes.
Walls and walls of hats.
Yeah, and we had it was not on True Grit. It was on the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and we were in like this teeny tiny, like, I don't know what it was, and we were like 16 different little mini rooms, but we had like I think they do it. It's like
At
at Western.
with the
We
stick?
made those, like they had the hooks and the stick, and then the sticks, but you'd walk if you were in a hurry and you walk by like the whole
They don't-
thing, flying and like. Yeah, the hats, because the hats are key in a Western.
Yeah.
The hats, it's all about the hat and the boot.
Yeah, it's about
And if
the
you get the hat wrong or the boot wrong, they'll tell you.
That's how I learned. That's the first lesson I learned on True Grit was like I would have 100 hats in the room, like just to find. The weirdest thing is that like sometimes towards like the end of the movie, like the first hat I put on somebody, I was like, that's the hat.
That's
like
it.
you get really good at finding the right hat
Because
for that character.
it's about their face
Yeah.
and what they can handle and how the brim and the crown, and each face is different. But we did get better. We got better at it. Yeah.
Now, there's a piece in in your show about a hat? Because once it gets a bullet hole in it or something, you have to leave it behind.
Yes. Are you talking about Tim
Yes.
Oliphant's hat? He ended the show in a different hat, a custom hat that we had made, which was an olive green felt made by Nick Fouquet.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
A very high crown. It was really nice. He took it home with him.
Of course he did. Of course he did. And it's interesting because it is all about the silhouette, but then it's also about the details that you remember all that time later, like the beautiful crown and the beautiful olive green. I have to bring up Maddie's boot on the roof.
Yeah, it was in, I really wanted her to be in a side button, like a little kid's shoe. And it's the ones that button up the side. And she was a teen at the time, but she still had a woman's size foot. And Maurizio,
Yeah.
may he rest in peace, built that boot. And he did such a beautiful job. He built all the boots. He built the boot that LaBeouf, who's Matt Damon, wears. He built the boot that Jeff Bridges wore. And he's such an amazing craftsman. And he loved to hear that the actor loved the boot. And I'm going to start to cry. But what I would do, like, he didn't go see the movie. But like, I would screenshot the still of the close-up, like on many occasions, he built me shoes that got close-ups, and that's one of them. And I would take a still and print it on nice printing paper and bring it to him. And I was like, this isn't, and like write the name of the movie. And yeah. Anyway, he was amazing. And I don't know, it's like, it's just such a loss. But he added so much to my films, and I'm sure everybody up here, like, I won't go into, but there's many, many other close-ups that his shoes got.
Which is a lovely thing. It's absolutely lovely. Gosh, where do we go from there? I know that's a genius gone. God bless him. I think one of the things that is obvious but bears remembering is, as each one of you have talked, and I do want to talk about the 5 freeway getting stuck and you being in the middle of nowhere in Santa Clarita with nothing at your disposal before FedEx and Amazon delivered everything to your door. But it speaks to the fact that we can all have the cleverest ideas in the world, or believe that we have the cleverest ideas in the world sometimes. But without our teams, without the Fabrizios, without the rental houses, without the research, without the brave person who's prepared to go in during the middle of a pandemic and remake something, without driving and picking up bears from places you've never been, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. It takes an army. It takes a committed army. It takes being able to phone a friend and say, please leave this fabric store open for us. They've just changed something. And none of us would be up on this stage if it wasn't for the extraordinary craftspeople and artists and suppliers who back us up each and every day.
Absolutely. And our amazing crews, which is part of that. I know you mentioned that, but like, none of us would be up here without our crew and our
We're only as good as our crews.
That's right.
Yeah.
There.
Takes a village. I said it takes a village.
Or an army.
I want to share a story of Julie Weiss.
Okay.
Because earlier today, you told us that there are some students in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was first moved back to Los Angeles in the late 80s, I was just starting my career. And I went to a guild event that had some costume designers up talking about their process. And one of them was Julie Weiss. It was the first day I ever met her. 1 or 2 other people had come up and talked about this and that, and then I do this and that. And Julie walks up, she sits down and says, I think of these ideas, and then mull them over in my head. I mean, she's like grabs us all. We all are like right there with her. And then I start to sketch, and I sketch and sketch, and I pick the fabric and I put it down there and I make it. And then they wear it and it's fabulous. And she goes, if you believe that, you're in the wrong business. And I love that story because she was telling us that it's not, no matter who you are, no matter how you're starting out or you've been doing it for 40 years, that it's not that, it's a process, and you make things that you throw out and you try it again and you get somebody's opinion when you get stuck and you just work it till you get it out there. But it's not that easy. But when I was younger, I did think people just kind of, God, how did they come up with that idea? Isn't that amazing? You know? Well, it's a process. It's going to the research. It's, you know, working on the script. It's doing all these other things that get you there. It's a process to get there. So all of you that are starting out, remember, there's a long process to get to where that beautiful bear costume came into play.
So we did get a couple of questions that were sent ahead, and Antoinette, this one's for you. It's from Valerie Spencer in 705, and she says Black culture has historically found creative ways to reinterpret and reclaim their identity through multiple forms of expression, specifically, in this instance, through costume and clothing. How did you, as a designer, showcase this legacy of undeniable swag and individuality in a period piece?
I made it.
I thought it.
It's a big question.
It's a big question, and I'm it's not that glib. It's a little deeper. I think what she's asking is, how did I innately give each character, these Black characters, individual style, hence swagger? It was a prerequisite, to be honest with you, with James Samuel, and now that I've done 2 films with him, it's a prerequisite, whether it's a Western or a biblical, they gotta have some swag. I like to think that even though we do different genres and different periods, that we ultimately all have our own style. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really loved about doing The Harder They Fall is being able to incorporate all my worlds, my fashion background, my styling background. I've had a clothing line, my love of character and creating that story through clothing and giving it a twist. And having the talent, the cast that I had, like nobody can wear those boots like Regina, you know, that helps. But also understanding that, helping them walk the walk, that it doesn't look costumed, that it looks real. So I'm hoping that I paid not only homage to the historical importance of the story we made. Some people saw a really fun Western. James wanted people to know that these people existed. They had their towns, they had their lives, they owned, they were special in their own right. And how can I help? How did I help to do that? By making it as beautiful and as organic as he envisioned. So I hope that gave it the swag. That helps.
I think that's fabulous. Paisha, if you had one piece of advice for young designers in this room, what would it be?
Work hard, do your best. That's it. You'll be successful.
Well, you were very brave. The first time you went in, you should tell that story.
Which one?
Well, for Cold Case.
Oh, for Cold Case. I had designed one tiny little movie that went to Sundance, and my budget was $5,000 for that movie. And that was all the experience I had when I went into interview for Cold Case. And I had been a set costumer. I had worked my way up. I had started as a PA, but I hadn't really had much design background. And I didn't really have much of a portfolio. So I had some sketches and I had nothing, basically. And somebody got me a courtesy meeting with Christiane Reed over at Bruckheimer. And I sort of showed her my, drawings and what I had. And I knew I wasn't going to get the job. I didn't have enough. And so I wanted the job. And so I thought once the meeting had sort of concluded, I needed to do something. And so the only thing I had going for me was honesty. And so I just looked at her and my voice started to crack. And I thought, oh God, please don't cry. And I just said, I know that there are people that have more experience. There are people that have, better resumes and more work under their belt and that you probably would feel more comfortable with. But I promise you, I will do everything I possibly can to deliver a good product and make everybody pleased with what I do because I need you to tell the next person that I can do it.
And you did.
She gave me the job.
The operative word being she. Like, you got to hand it to a woman to give,
Point in fact, Jennifer Pellington, I'm not sure if a lot of you remember Jennifer Pellington. She was a costume designer, married to Mark Pellington, a director. She helped me get the break.
That's pretty great. Okay, Hisi, your turn. Something you wish you had been told when you were starting out. And you can't tell the Julia Weiss story again.
Oh, I blew it already.
I know. Because you've done such an amazing wide range. Well, you all have, but, and I have to confess, we were talking backstage or in the green room or whatever, and Narnia is still one of my, I loved these books as a child. And when I knew it was coming, they were making it into a film, I said, they're going to mess it up. Because you've read it as a child and it's so visually, you're there, right? Well, she didn't mess it up.
Oh, thanks, Kate. Sweet. That's sweet.
So what advice would you give? Because you've done such a broad spectrum of work.
I've just been very lucky to do lots. Everything from $1 million to $250 million projects to different genres. It's what makes it interesting. And that's kind of why I'm in the business, because we get bored easily and we need to be stimulated by something we've never done before and challenge ourselves. I don't know. Listen, I've had this discussion with some friends of mine of late. We didn't know what we were getting into. I had no idea. I grew up in Hollywood. I loved movies. I sewed and made things with my mother. I loved the movies. We went all the time. I love a story. And I thought, okay, I'll be a costume designer at 15. And I didn't even know what it meant. I didn't know what it took. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know you could study at theater. I didn't know theater. I lived in Los Angeles. I was born in Hollywood. So the thought of going to study costume was theater, not, there was nothing with film. Now there is, thanks to Deborah. But so I don't know. It's like one of those things you just go in blind. I never knew how much I was going to make. I didn't know what the possibilities were. I didn't know how much I was going to get to travel. I traveled the world. It's just been a blessing, it's just been a blessing. And it's an interesting job. And it's varied, which is the best part. I mean, I think of all the genres Mary's done also, you know, with the Coen brothers alone, just with those guys, not to mention all the other stuff you've done. It's like keeps it interesting. Yeah. And it keeps us learning something new all the time. Every single job we learn. There's not a job that I don't learn something new about the world, and there's not a job I don't learn something new about the job I do, because the variables are always different and there's always a new lesson. So that keeps it fresh.
I think that's true. Did you always want to be a costume designer, Mary?
No. No, I did not know the job existed until the end of my senior year in college. I didn't. I grew up in South Florida, and it was before the internet, and it was not anything that I had any contact with. So I didn't even think of it as something to do until I was a senior in college. And then it was the journey to just.
So how did you get from Southern Florida to Los Angeles?
I went to school in upstate New York. I was in New York City, and that's where I started working. And then I got a job. Ellen Marajinek hired me, and I had a rat in my apartment in New York, and it was a really good excuse to leave New York. And I came to LA for a job with Ellen, and I was thankful for her for the rest of my life. And then I got a rat in LA. But anyway, but that's how I ended up in LA. So, but yeah, it's a long journey, and it's like I'm so grateful for it, and it's so different now than it was when I started. And but I think what you said before is that, like, if you love it, but you work really hard and try your very best, and you have to be like a sponge, you still learn, and because it's still changing, you learn on every single job that you do. And but yeah, no, it's a great, I'm so lucky. I know I'm so lucky. And
I think that's the problem. We all spend our time saying to everybody, as we tell them stories about snowstorms and freezing and late casting and COVID and not getting scripts on time. At least now you're writing them, thank goodness.
You're in control.
I hope you get them out.
And at the
They're
same
on
time, we
time.
all say we wouldn't want to do anything else.
Or I'm not qualified to do anything else.
That's true.
So I think on that note,
I don't know what I would
So true.
that's sort of the perfect note to end on. I'm not either. Gosh, that's sad. My thanks to each and every one of you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight.
And a special thanks once more to our sponsors, to Western and Double RL. And Ivy, thank you for organizing this. Brigitte, bless you for being our fearless leader through uncertain times. And thank you all so very much for coming. And God bless the Audrey for giving us a home tonight.
Drive safe. Drive safe.